Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today I'm genuinely excited because we are taking a massive step back.
Yeah.
Usually we're zoomed in on the gears of the modern world.
Yeah.
AI, supply chains, energy grids, all the stuff that keeps the lights on. But today we are looking at the operating system of humanity itself.
It really is. It's the single biggest demographic grouping on the planet, if you don't count, biology itself. It shapes how we vote, how we eat, who we marry, and how we face death.
We were talking about religion. But before you hit pause or roll your eyes thinking this is going to be a sermon or a debate about which book is the right one, stop.
Please, yeah.
Because that is exactly what we are not doing. We aren't here to debate theology. We aren't asking, does God exist?
No, not at all. We're looking at the phenomenon, the container. We're asking, what is this thing we call religion? Where did the word even come from? Why does our brain seem, I don't know, wired for it?
And maybe the most shocking part is the concept itself, a modern invention.
That's the real kicker.
That's the hook that honestly floored me when I was going through the stack of research you brought today. The idea that religion, this thing we just assume is as old as the first cave painting, is actually a relatively new piece of, mental technology.
It sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It sounds wrong. I mean, we talk about ancient religions all the time, but you're telling me that if I hopped in a time machine, went back to ancient Greece or pre-colonial India, and asked someone about their religion, they wouldn't just be confused by the language.
No, they'd be confused by the whole category.
By the category itself.
Precisely. It would be like asking a fish to describe the water. It's not a separate thing. It's just the medium they swim in. The whole way we separate sacred things from secular things is a very specific, very modern, and frankly, a largely Western way of organizing the world.
So our mission today is to deconstruct that box. We're going to look at the etymological feud over the word itself, which is surprisingly spicy for a debate over Latin roots.
It is, yeah.
We're going to look at how colonial history basically forced the world into these neat little boxes. And then we're going to pivot to the hard science, the psychology, the sociology, the cognitive reasons why 84% of the human population identifies with a religious group.
And we'll finish by looking at the future, because contrary to that popular narrative that, science is killing God, the data tells a very, very different story.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start right at the beginning. The word itself, religion. It's English, obviously, but it comes from the Latin religio.
It does, but here's the thing. Even in ancient Rome, right at the source, there was no real consensus on what religio actually meant. In fact, you've got this heavyweight philosophical boxing match that spans centuries.
Okay, so in one corner we have Cicero,
the great Roman statesman, orator, philosopher writing in the 1st century BC. And Cicero argued that religio derives from the verb religere.
Religere, and what does that translate to?
It means to go over again or to read again, to consider carefully.
That sounds very studious, not very spiritual.
It is. For Cicero, being religious wasn't about having mystical visions or, feeling a warm, fuzzy glow in your heart. It was about diligence. It was about conscientiousness. The opposite of religio for Cicero was negligentia negligence.
Wait a minute. That's a fascinating connection.
Yeah.
So religion as the opposite of negligence. In the Ciceronian sense, an accountant who triple checks his spreadsheet to make sure every penny is accounted for is being religious.
In that very specific sense, yes, absolutely. It implies a scrupulous attention to duty. A religious person is someone who follows the protocols, who pays attention to the details of the rituals or the laws, not because they're faithful in our modern emotional sense, but because they are conscientious.
That's almost bureaucratic.
It's very bureaucratic. It feels very Roman: order, structure, duty. But then fast forward a few centuries, and the Christians enter the ring.
Right.
And you have thinkers like Lactantius and later St. Augustine, and they really didn't like Cicero's definition.
Too dry for them.
Far too dry, too procedural. They argued for a completely different root, religare.
Religare. That sounds like ligament, something that connects.
Exactly. It means to bind, to fasten, to connect. The idea here is that religion is the thing that binds you to God. It's a tether.
Or it binds a community together.
That too. And that's the definition that really stuck in the West, isn't it? When we talk about religion today, we think of that binding. I am bound to this creed, or I am bound to this community.
Yeah, that's definitely the one that won out.
It is certainly the dominant view in Western Christianity. But, and here's the crucial context we so often miss, this is where the whole invention part comes in. Whether you like Cicero's diligence or Augustine's binding in the ancient world, neither of them saw religio as a separate sphere of life.
What do you mean by a separate sphere?
Well, think about your life today. You probably have your secular life, your job, your politics, your gym routine, and then maybe on the weekend you have your spiritual life. You go to a service or you meditate, you pray. They're in different compartments.
Right, church and state. Sunday morning versus Monday morning.
Exactly. That dichotomy, that separation, it just didn't exist. In ancient Rome, religio was woven into the absolute fabric of the state. Senate meetings were religious events. Declaring war was a religious ritual. You couldn't pull them apart.
I saw a note in the research about Julius Caesar. He used the word religio to talk about the oath that soldiers took.
Yes, the military oath. Following orders was a religious act. It was a solemn duty to the state and the gods of the state, all at the same time. You couldn't separate your political loyalty from your religious loyalty. They were one and the same thing.
To be a Roman was to practice Roman religion.
I got it. It's so hard for us to wrap our heads around that because we're so used to religion being a private belief.
Yeah.
But my favorite example of how broad this concept used to be, you have to bring this one up.
I have to because I love it. Pliny the Elder and the elephants.
The elephants. It's such a beautiful, weird detail from his natural history.
So Pliny, the Roman naturalist, he actually writes that elephants have a sense of religio.
He did. He really did.
He observed them looking up at the night sky, at the moon and stars, and he didn't just see animals gazing into space. He interpreted that as awe, as reverence.
And this is the key. He wasn't saying the elephants had a Bible or a priest or a theology.
No.
He was saying they possessed that Ciceronian quality of careful consideration of the cosmos. They recognized the grandeur of the universe, and they respected it.
Which implies that religio was almost a biological trait or maybe a cognitive state rather than a membership in a club?
Exactly. It was a stance toward reality, not a checkbox on a census form.
So if that's where we started, with this really broad, integrated sense of duty and awe and social cohesion, how on earth did we end up with the world religions model we have today? The pie chart in the textbook, 30% Christian, 20% Muslim, whatever. When did we start putting people in these rigid boxes?
That is the invention part of our title, and it really kicks into high gear in the 16th and 17th centuries. You have two massive world-altering things happening at once. First, you have the Protestant Reformation in Europe.
Which just rips the map apart.
Completely. I mean, before that, in the West, you just had Christendom. It was the water everyone swam in. Right. But suddenly, you have Lutherans, Calvinists, Anabaptists, Catholics, Anglicans, and they aren't just disagreeing, they are killing each other.
The 30 Years' War, civil wars, it's just chaos.
Total chaos. And so the state needs a way to manage this violence.
Right, they have to do something.
They need to define what belongs to the church, which becomes the realm of private belief, and what belongs to the state, the realm of public order, so they can stop these wars of religion. They literally invent the concept of religion as a private, distinct category to quarantine the explosive stuff so society can function.
Okay, you can believe whatever you want in your private religion box. Just don't let it mess with the state box.
That's it. It's a political solution. But at the exact same time, Europe is expanding. The age of exploration is underway. So sailors, merchants, and missionaries are getting on boats and landing in the Americas, in India, in Japan, and they are carrying this new, very specific mental box called religion with them.
And they're looking for the local equivalent. Take me to your leader and also take me to your church.
Right. And this leads to some profound misunderstandings. They land in the New World and ask the Native Americans, "What is your religion?" And the answer is usually just silence or confusion.
Because, again, no word for it.
Because they didn't have the concept. Their spirituality was just life.
Yeah.
It was how you hunted buffalo. It was the medicine you used for a fever. It was how you treated your elders. It wasn't a thing you did once a week.
It was the air they breathed.
It was. So the Europeans looked at this and said, oh, these people have no religion. Or even worse, they have devil worship and superstition.
It's a failure of translation that leads to cultural erasure. But it gets even more concrete when we look at Japan. This story about the treaty in 1853, this really drove it home for me.
It is a perfect case study. So Commodore Perry shows up with American warships, gunboat diplomacy.
Right.
He demands Japan open its ports to trade. But he also demands a treaty that includes a clause for freedom of religion for Americans living in Japan.
Which is just standard American boilerplate. We need our rights protected.
To the Americans, yes. To the Japanese, it was a linguistic nightmare. They literally did not have a word for religion that matched the Western concept of a specific set of doctrines distinct from the state.
Right.
They had Buddhism, they had Shinto rituals, they had Confucian ethics, but these were all overlapping layers of culture. They weren't distinct teams you could join.
So what do they do? Do they just shrug their shoulders?
They had to invent a word. Shukyu. It was a neologism, a brand new word, created specifically to satisfy the Western treaty. They had to carve out a conceptual space in their own culture just to interact with the West.
That's the power of language right there.
Yeah.
We forced them to restructure their own reality to fit our legal paperwork.
And we did the exact same thing in India. We use the word Hinduism today as if it's a single thing. You know, like, I am a Catholic, I'm a Hindu. But Himli was originally just a geographic term.
Right. It had to do with the Indus River, didn't it?
Yes. The Persians used it to describe the people who lived beyond the Indus River. It was like saying Southerners or Europeans. It just meant the folks over there.
So it wasn't a belief system. It was a location.
Exactly. But when the British colonizers arrived in the 19th century, they needed to categorize the population for the census and for legal codes. They saw this wild diversity of practices. I mean, people worshiping Vishnu, people worshiping Shiva, village deities, philosophical atheists, tantric rituals, and they just lumped it all together under one umbrella, Hinduism.
So Hinduism, as a unified world religion, is basically a British administrative convenience.
In terms of the label and the singular category, yes. Now, obviously, the traditions, the texts, the Vedas, the rituals, they are ancient. But the idea that they all belong to one single system is a colonial imposition. It's the West projecting its own expectation of one God, one book, one church onto a culture that operates totally differently.
It really makes you question the entire world religions textbook. We're essentially looking at a map that was drawn by people who didn't understand the territory.
That's the key takeaway. The map is not the territory. But, and here is the paradox, even if the map is flawed, the territory is still populated. We might have invented the word, but we didn't invent the behavior.
Right. We can argue semantics all day, but the numbers are just staggering. 84% of the world, that's the number from the Pew Research Center. That's what, 5.8 billion people identify with a religious group. So even if the definitions are fuzzy, the identification is very real.
It is massive. And despite all the nuances we just discussed, demographers and sociologists still need those boxes to make sense of the data. So we generally stick to the big four to describe the global landscape.
Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism.
Correct. Those four comprise about 77% of the global population. But if we really want to understand how these people think, not just count them, we need a better taxonomy than just a list of names. So scholars usually break them down into three major families of belief, and these families operate on very different logics.
I found this breakdown really helpful. It moves away from just names and looks at the underlying operating system of the belief. The first family is the Abrahamic.
The Western monotheism, so Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and then smaller groups like the Baha'i and the Druze.
And the core logic here is history, lineage.
It's revelation and covenant. The idea is that God is a singular personal entity who acts in history.
Oh, yeah?
He speaks to prophets, he gives laws. There is a start point, creation, and an end point, judgment. It's a linear view of time, and it's very, very text-based. It is written.
Okay, so that's the linear text-heavy one-God model. Then you move east and you hit the Dharmic family.
The Indian tradition, so Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, the logic here isn't necessarily about a creator, God giving orders, though that can be part of it, but the core logic is dharma.
Which translates to law or duty, right?
Yes, but more in the sense of cosmic law, like gravity. The universe has an order. If you act against it, you accumulate bad karma. If you act with it, you move toward liberation. The goal isn't always heaven in the Western sense. It's escape from the cycle of rebirth.
It sounds more mechanical in a spiritual way, like cause and effect. You drop the ball, it falls. You do a bad thing, you get bad results in the next life.
Precisely. It's an engine of cause and effect.
Yeah.
And then the third family is the Taoic or East Asian traditions, Taoism, Confucianism, Shinto.
And the key word here is Tao.
The way.
The flow. This is much less about dogma and much more about harmony. Harmony with nature, harmony with the ancestors, harmony with the state. In Shinto, for example, there are no 10 commandments. There's no thou shalt not.
Really?
No, it's all about purity and pollution. It's about maintaining a right relationship with the spirits of the land. This helps explain why people in East Asia often don't tick the religion box on surveys, even if they're doing rituals every day.
Exactly. If you ask a Japanese person, are you religious? They might say no, because they associate religion with that intense, dogmatic, Abrahamic style. Do you believe in the creed?
Right.
But if you ask them, do you visit the shrine on New Year's? Do you have an altar for your ancestors? They'll say, of course. To them, that's just culture. That's just propriety. It's like brushing your teeth.
Which brings us to a huge and often invisible group, the folk religions.
Yeah.
The data says there are 400 million people in this category, but you mentioned they're often overlooked in these big conversations.
They are the silent giants. A folk religion is the practical spirituality of the village. It's syncretic. It mixes everything. So in China, you might have a mix of Buddhist compassion, Taoist longevity practices, and Confucian ethics, all blended with worship of a local river god.
It's like a spiritual toolbox. You just grab whatever works for the problem at hand.
It is highly pragmatic. You don't worship to save your soul in some distant theological sense. You worship to ensure the harvest is good, or that your child passes their exam, or that grandma recovers from the flu. It's very transactional and local. But because it doesn't have a pope or a Bible, Western demographers often just label it other or miss it entirely.
And speaking of missing things, we have to talk about the knowns, the growing slice of the pie chart, at least in the West. Atheists, agnostics.
And the spiritual, but not religious. That distinction is vital. A huge portion of the knowns in the U.S., for example, actually believe in a higher power.
They just don't trust institutions.
Exactly. They've left the church, but they haven't necessarily left God. They have unbundled.
So we have the definitions, or the lack thereof. We have the categories. We want to get to the machinery, the hardware.
Right.
Why do we do this? Why is the human animal so prone to looking for invisible agents and forming these groups?
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
No.
If religion is an invention, why did everyone invent it? And you have three main lenses here: sociology, psychology, and now cognitive science.
Let's start with the sociologists. Emil Durkheim, the big gun.
The father of the field, really. Writing in the early 1900s, Durkheim looked at religion and said, this isn't about God, this is about us.
Us? You mean the group, the community?
Yes. He argued that religion is the way society worships itself. Think about a totem pole in a tribe. The totem represents the clan. When they dance around it, what they're really doing is celebrating their own unity.
He called it collective effervescence, right? That's the term.
That's the term, that buzzing, electric feeling you get when you are in a massive crowd all focused on the same thing.
Like a Taylor Swift concert or the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Durkheim would say those are religious experiences. They function in exactly the same way. They bind the individual to the group. They create shared norms and values. Without that social glue, society falls apart into what he called enemy normlessness, alienation.
So for Durkheim, religion is a social survival mechanism. It keeps us from killing each other by giving us a shared sacred object to rally around. But William James, the psychologist, he went the other way.
The total opposite. James wasn't interested in the crowd at all. He was interested in the solitude. He defined religion as the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude.
So far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine.
Right. It's the mystic on the mountaintop. It's the internal click, the aha moment.
A near-death experience.
The feeling of oneness. James wanted to know what was happening in the mind, not the church. He felt the institution was just the secondary crust. The raw experience was the molten core.
And that leads us perfectly to the modern cognitive scientists.
Yeah.
Because now we can actually look at the mind, or at least the evolutionary architecture of the brain. And their theory is, well, it's a bit startling.
It's the theory of HADD, the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device.
HADD. Okay, break that down for me.
Okay, so our brains are evolved for survival, not for truth. We are pattern-seeking machines. Imagine you are an early human on the African savanna. You are walking through the tall grass. Suddenly, you hear a rustle, snap.
Okay.
You have two choices. Theory A, it's just the wind. Theory B, it's a lion.
Okay, let's play the odds. If I pick theory A, it's just the wind, and I'm wrong.
Your lunch. You die. You don't pass on your genes. Game over.
Right. But if I pick theory B, it's a lion, and I'm wrong.
You just get a little spooked, you run away, you waste a few calories. The cost of a false positive is very low, but the cost of a false negative is death.
So evolution basically bred us to be paranoid.
It bred us to detect agency, to assume that when something happens, someone or something did it. The grass didn't just move, a lion moved it. The thunder didn't just boom, a powerful being banged a drum.
And that just scales up. The plague didn't just happen, God sent it. The crop failed, a witch cursed it.
Exactly. We are hardwired to look for the who behind the what. Religion, in this view, is a byproduct of that survival mechanism. We populate the universe with invisible agents, gods, spirits, ancestors, because our brains are allergic to randomness. We need a narrative.
That explains the origin, maybe, but why does it persist? Is it just a glitch? Because the data you mentioned suggests it's actually good for us.
This is the utility argument. The Mayo Clinic and others have published extensive data on this. Religious involvement correlates with lower blood pressure, lower rates of depression, better immune function, and longer life expectancy.
Is it the power of prayer, or is that just, I don't know, hanging out with people?
It's likely a mix, but the community aspect is huge. It goes right back to Durkheim. Social isolation is as deadly as smoking. Religion provides a built-in support network. If you get sick, the congregation brings you a casserole. That literally lowers your stress hormones.
Plus the coping mechanism. I mean, if I believe my suffering has a purpose, it's God's plan, or it's balancing my karma, I can endure it better than if I think it's just random cruel luck.
Meaning is a powerful drug. Viktor Frankl wrote about this in the concentration camps. Those who could find meaning survived longer, and religion is a meaning-making machine.
But we have to look at the outliers. Because if religion is so good for health and social cohesion, why are the richest, healthiest countries in the world, places like Sweden, Norway, Japan, abandoning it?
This is the famous secularization hypothesis.
Yeah.
The theory was that as societies get rich, safe, and scientific, they don't need religion anymore. They have insurance companies for security, they have hospitals for health, they have Netflix for entertainment.
God fills the gaps, and when the gaps get smaller, God gets smaller.
That's the theory. And in Europe, for the most part, it holds up perfectly. The wealthier the country, the less religious it is.
But then there is the United States.
The giant, baffling exception. The U.S. is wealthy, scientifically advanced, high-tech, and yet, compared to Europe, it is incredibly religious.
Why? Why is America different?
There's a fascinating theory called religious market theory. It basically treats religion like a business. In Europe, for centuries, you had state churches, the Church of England, the Lutheran Church of Sweden. They were monopolies.
Right.
And like any monopoly, like the DMV, they got lazy.
They didn't have to compete for customers.
Exactly. They had guaranteed customers through taxes. So the service got boring, the message got stale, and when people finally had the choice, they just stopped going. But in the U.S., because of the separation of church and state, you had a free market, no state funding. If a church wanted to survive, it had to hustle.
It had to market itself.
It had to provide better music, better childcare, better sermons, better coffee after the service.
It's spiritual capitalism.
It is, and competition drives up consumption. Because American churches are constantly adapting to the market, American religiosity stays high, they innovate, they create megachurches, cowboy churches, biker churches, you name it.
That is such a cynical and yet completely compelling explanation. But looking forward, zooming out to the whole globe, where is this all going? I feel like the narrative in my social circles is religion is dying, science has won.
And that narrative is statistically dead wrong. If you look at the global demographic trends, the world is actually becoming more religious, not less.
How is that possible if the West is secularizing?
Because the West is shrinking, or at least it's stagnating. It all comes down to birth rates.
Oh.
The knowns, secular people, have very low birth rates. They tend to live in cities, focus on careers, and have fewer children, on average well below replacement level.
Whereas religious populations
have much higher birth rates. Sub-Saharan Africa is exploding in population, and it is intensely religious, both Christian and Muslim. The future of Christianity isn't in Paris or Pittsburgh, it's in Lagos and Manila.
So biology just wins.
Demography is destiny. By 2075, Islam is projected to potentially become the largest religion in the world, simply due to population momentum. The secular West might feel like it's the future, but statistically, it's becoming a smaller and smaller island in a very religious sea.
That reframes everything. We aren't moving toward some kind of Star Trek atheist future. We are moving toward a potentially more polarized, but definitely more deeply faithful world.
A world where understanding these boxes, Abrahamic, Dharmic folk, is going to be more important geopolitically than ever before. We can't just wish religion away or assume it will evaporate with better education. It seems to be fundamental to how the majority of the species sees reality.
We've covered so much ground today. We've gone from the Roman Senate to the African savanna to the future of the global South. And we've realized that the very word religion itself is a clumsy tool.
It's a map that doesn't quite fit the territory, but it's still the only map we have.
I want to leave the listener with a thought that struck me while we were discussing the knowns and the elephants. If Pliny was right, if elephants can have religio, and if Durkheim was right, that we are really just worshiping society, then maybe the secular world isn't actually non-religious at all. Maybe we've just changed the gods.
We trade the altar for the stadium or the political rally or the brand.
Exactly.
Right.
We still bind ourselves. We still have religio. We just don't call it that anymore.
We are, and it seems we always have been, believing animals.
A provocative thought to end on. Next time you catch yourself checking your phone religiously or defending your favorite sports team with irrational fury, ask yourself, is this my religio? Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.